Why would the man everyone ignores, the janitor sweeping the halls at midnight, end up holding the most dangerous secret in the entire school? On the surface, David was nothing more than a single dad working for scraps, a mop in his hands, and bills piling up at home. But behind those quiet footsteps echoing through the empty corridors, destiny was about to collide with him in a way no one could have imagined. One stormy night, he stumbled upon something that powerful men would kill to keep hidden. What started as just another shift would unravel into a nightmare of lies, betrayal, and revelations that threatened to destroy everything he loved. And the first twist? It all began with saving a stranger's daughter. Do you believe even the invisible can turn the tables on the mighty? If you agree, drop a simple "why" in the comments. David never planned to become a janitor. Years earlier, he had been a skilled mechanic, the kind of man who could fix anything with his hands. Cars, radios, even broken toys his little girl brought home. But after his wife died in a highway accident, grief tore through him like a wrecking ball. Bills stacked higher than he could pay, and the only job that would take him quickly was mopping floors in a private high school that seemed a world away from his own. For a single dad raising his 9-year-old daughter Sarah, the paycheck, though humiliatingly small, meant food on the table and a roof over their heads. Every morning after clocking out from his night shift, David would drive across the quiet suburbs of Ridgewood in a dented old pickup. The truck rattled with every turn, but Sarah didn't care. She would sit in the passenger seat clutching her secondhand backpack, humming songs she learned in class, and peppering him with stories about her day. Those drives, short as they were, became the highlight of his life. Her laughter filled the cab like sunlight breaking through storm clouds, reminding him why he kept pushing forward. Life in their small 2-bedroom apartment was far from glamorous. The ceiling leaked whenever it rained, the heater groaned in winter, and cockroaches sometimes scurried across the kitchen tiles. Yet David made sure Sarah never went to bed hungry, even if it meant he skipped meals himself. On weekends, when his overtime shifts ended early, they'd make popcorn, watch old Disney movies on a secondhand TV, and pretend the flickering screen was a theater just for them. Those simple rituals stitched together a fragile sense of normalcy, a thread of love stronger than the hardships surrounding them. The school where David worked was the opposite of his home. Marble floors gleamed under chandeliers, lockers lined with polished brass, and students who carried designer bags as casually as grocery totes. Their sneakers cost more than his monthly rent. To them, David was invisible, a shadow pushing a mop bucket, a man whose presence barely registered. And yet, as he swept the deserted hallways late at night, he noticed everything others overlooked. The whispers of students sneaking into classrooms, the teachers arguing in hushed tones, the way certain doors were locked that shouldn't have been. Secrets clung to that school like dust on the windowsills he cleaned. Despite the silent judgments of wealthy parents and arrogant teenagers, David wore his uniform with quiet dignity. He taught Sarah to never look down on honest work. "It's not the job that defines you," he told her one night over dinner. "It's the way you protect the people you love." She nodded, eyes wide, believing every word. He believed it too, though sometimes the weight of his circumstances tested his faith. In the solitude of those empty hallways, he often wondered if life had anything left to give him beyond struggle. But destiny has a cruel way of disguising itself as routine. The very place where David was most invisible was also where fate had hidden its sharpest turn. He didn't know it yet, but the polished corridors he swept each night would soon become the stage for a drama that would shake the city. All it would take was one storm, one mistake, and one desperate cry for help to drag him from obscurity into a battle far greater than he could imagine. The storm rolled in without warning. Thunder cracked over Ridgewood, rattling the tall windows of the private school as rain hammered against the glass. David tightened his jacket as he pushed the mop across the science wing floor, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. He had cleaned this hallway 1,000 times, but that night, something felt different. A faint hiss echoed from the chemistry lab, a sound he'd never heard before. Curiosity tugged at him. He set down the mop and slowly pushed the door open. Inside, The room was dim, lit only by the bluish glow of equipment left running. The sharp sting of chemicals hung heavy in the air. On the floor, sprawled near a counter of overturned beakers, lay a girl. Her long hair fanned across the tiles, her chest rising in shallow, desperate gasps. Without thinking, David rushed to her side. He checked her pulse. It fluttered weakly. He dragged her toward the open hallway, coughing as the fumes burned his throat. "Stay with me," he whispered, hoisting her in his arms. She was light, fragile, far too young to be alone in a locked lab after hours. He pushed through the storm of rain-smeared corridors and carried her to the nurse's office. His hands trembled as he dialed emergency services from the wall phone. The girl stirred faintly, her lips forming a name he couldn't quite catch. Minutes later, sirens wailed outside, paramedics bursting through the entrance. They took the girl from his arms, fitting her with an oxygen mask, rushing her to the waiting ambulance. David stood soaked in sweat and rain, heart pounding, wondering who she was and how she ended up in such danger. The answer came brutally fast. By morning, David's picture was plastered across news channels and online feeds. Grainy security footage showed him carrying the unconscious girl down the hall. But instead of painting him as her rescuer, the narrative twisted. School janitor suspected of kidnapping wealthy student. The wealthy student, her name now revealed, was none other than Isabella Hayes, daughter of Richard Hayes, the city's most powerful CEO. Cameras flashed outside the school gates, reporters swarmed, and social media exploded with accusations. Parents demanded answers. The board of directors suspended David without pay pending investigation. Overnight, he became a villain in the public eye. At home, Sarah clutched his sleeve. "Daddy, you didn't do anything wrong, right?" Her voice trembled, filled with confusion. He knelt, holding her close. "I swear to you, Sarah, I was only trying to help." But deep inside, he felt the walls closing in. He knew how quickly the world turned against men like him. Poor, invisible, disposable. The cruel irony was unbearable. The act of saving a life had painted him as a criminal. The more he tried to explain, the less anyone believed. Parents at Sarah's school whispered when she passed. A neighbor left a cruel note on their door. His world, already fragile, was collapsing. But one truth clung to him through the chaos. Isabella was alive because of him. Somewhere in that chaos of flashing cameras and corporate lies, she held the power to clear his name. Whether she would speak it or remain silent was a question that could decide the fate of his life, his daughter's future, and the shadow of secrets hidden deep within Ridgewood High. The following days felt like walking through fire. David's phone rang endlessly with reporters demanding comments. His name dragged through every headline as if guilt had already been proven. The school board issued a formal statement distancing themselves from him, and parents threatened to pull their children out unless the dangerous janitor was removed permanently. The bitterest sting came when Sarah came home from school with red-rimmed eyes. "They called you a kidnapper, Dad," she whispered. "They said you're going to jail." David hugged her tightly, his chest aching with rage and helplessness. Yet the truth fought to break free. Isabella, still recovering in the hospital, whispered to her nurses and to anyone who would listen that the janitor had saved her life. He had pulled her out of the poisoned lab, not dragged her into it. But her words never reached the public. The Hayes family, led by her father, Richard Hayes, stepped in with polished lawyers and a media team. Their version of the story painted Isabella as confused, traumatized, unable to recall the events correctly. Any mention of David's heroism was quickly buried under carefully crafted press releases. Late one evening, David received an unexpected visitor. Isabella herself, frail but determined, slipped into his apartment building through the back entrance, her hoodie pulled low. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice trembling, "you don't deserve what's happening to you." From her pocket, she pulled out a small silver USB drive. "This has proof of what my father is hiding. What happened in that lab wasn't an accident. It was part of a bigger experiment. If you give this to the right people, it can clear your name." David stared at her, torn between gratitude and suspicion. "Why give this to me? Shouldn't you be the one telling the truth?" Isabella's eyes welled with tears. "Because I'm not strong enough. My father controls everything, the school, the police, even the news. If I speak, he'll bury me. But you have nothing left to lose." That night, David held the USB like it was dynamite. For the first time since the ordeal began, he felt a flicker of hope. Yet fear gnawed at him. If the Hayes family was willing to frame him to protect their secrets, what would they do if he exposed them? The next morning, the weight of the decision grew heavier. A black car idled across the street from his apartment. Men in suits lingered nearby, watching. When he tried to leave for groceries, one of them muttered, "Drop it, Carter. Some things are bigger than you." Their warning chilled him to the bone. At home, Sarah noticed his unease. "What's wrong, Dad?" she asked, clutching her stuffed rabbit. He forced a smile. "Nothing we can't handle." But his hands shook as he hid the USB beneath a loose floorboard. He couldn't risk Sarah stumbling into danger. Days passed, and the pressure mounted. Online, the accusations against him intensified, fueled by anonymous accounts. His landlord hinted at eviction. Even old friends avoided his calls. The walls were closing in. And then, the unthinkable happened. The USB he had hidden vanished. When David pried open the floorboard, his blood ran cold. The space was empty. His one chance at redemption had been stolen from under his nose. Was Isabella playing him? Had someone been watching his every move? In that moment, David realized he was not just fighting for his name. He was caught in a war with forces far larger and far more ruthless than he ever imagined. The emptiness beneath the floorboard was a knife to David's chest. His only leverage, the tiny USB that Isabella swore would clear his name, had vanished. He tore apart the apartment, ripping open drawers, checking vents, overturning cushions, only to confirm the truth. Someone had stolen it. Panic clawed at his throat. Without that proof, he was just a desperate janitor accused of the worst. That night, Isabella appeared again. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. I took it back," she confessed, trembling. "I couldn't go through with it. My father found out I gave it to you. He threatened to cut me off, to destroy me if I didn't retrieve it." David stared at her, disbelief and anger colliding. "Do you understand what you've done? That was my only chance. My daughter's life is falling apart because of this." His voice cracked with fury, yet beneath it lay despair. Isabella sobbed, "I'm sorry. I thought I could help, but I'm too scared. I can't fight him." For a moment, David felt crushed. Everything he endured, the humiliation, the accusations, Sarah's tears, had been for nothing. He was alone again, cornered by a system that wanted him silent. But then, fate shifted in the unlikeliest way. Sarah, who had been listening quietly from the kitchen doorway, stepped forward, clutching an old, dusty music book. "Dad," she whispered, "is this what you're looking for?" She opened the cover, revealing a thin memory card taped inside. "I found it in the piano room at school. You always tell me to look closely at things other people ignore. I saw Isabella hide it weeks ago before the accident." David's heart jolted. He took the memory card, slotting it into his battered laptop. Files opened, video footage, documents, chemical reports. All damning evidence of Richard Hayes' secret experiments. Not only had they been running illegal trials inside the school, but they had endangered students' lives. The lab accident that nearly killed Isabella had been the result of one such experiment gone wrong. For the first time, the truth was in his hands. And yet, danger coiled tighter around him. The men in suits watching his building weren't just idle. They were hunters. If they suspected he had this evidence, they would stop at nothing. David weighed his options. He could run, vanish with Sarah before Hayes' men closed in. But running would mean living in fear forever. Or he could risk everything, his safety, even his freedom, to deliver the evidence to the police and shatter Hayes' empire. Resolve hardened in his chest. "We're not victims anymore," he told Sarah, clutching her hand. "We fight. That night, he drove through pounding rain toward the district attorney's office. The memory card clutched like a lifeline. Every turn of the wheel felt like threading a needle through darkness. Shadows trailed him. Black cars in the rearview mirror, headlights cutting through the storm. Sarah sat beside him, wide-eyed, but brave, whispering, "We'll make it, Dad. We have to." As he pulled into the courthouse lot, his heart thundered. This was it, the moment that could either free him or destroy him. He sprinted through the doors, men shouting behind him, and in that chaotic rush, the climax of his journey became clear. A single father, dismissed by the world, about to expose the most powerful man in the city. But what awaited him inside was not the justice he imagined. It was another twist, one that would tear open a secret buried even deeper. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and cold stone, a place built to promise justice, yet haunted by corruption. David burst through the heavy doors, clutching the memory card like it was the last thread holding his life together. Rainwater dripped from his jacket onto the marble floor as he demanded to see the district attorney. Guards blocked his way at first, their suspicion fueled by the headlines calling him a kidnapper. But desperation lent him strength. "I have proof," he shouted, his voice echoing. "Proof of what Hayes has been hiding." Minutes stretched like hours until a young assistant ushered him into a private office. David's hands shook as he inserted the card into a laptop, praying the files hadn't been corrupted. One by one, windows opened. Videos of experiments, invoices signed by Hayes himself, lab reports detailing chemical compounds too dangerous for human exposure. The assistant's eyes widened. This could bring down the entire Hayes Corporation. For a heartbeat, relief washed over David. Justice was within reach. But the door creaked open, and the room fell silent. Standing there, flanked by two men in tailored suits, was Richard Hayes himself. "Impressive, Carter," Hayes drawled, his voice smooth as velvet. "But you should know by now, truth is just another commodity, and I own the market." David's stomach dropped. How had Hayes gotten here so quickly? The assistant paled, backing away as if invisible strings pulled him. David realized with horror. Hayes's reach wasn't limited to the school or the media. It stretched into the very heart of the justice system. "You framed me," David said, his voice low, controlled. "You nearly let your daughter die, all to protect this?" He gestured at the laptop screen. Hayes's smirk didn't falter. "Sacrifices must be made. You of all people should understand that. After all, didn't you lose your wife in a tragic accident?" The words sliced through David like a blade. He staggered back. Hayes leaned closer, his eyes cold. "Yes, Carter, that wasn't fate. She was a liability. She knew too much. And she's not dead. She's been very much alive, in a place only I control." The revelation detonated in David's chest. For years he had mourned her, raised Sarah alone, built his life on the ashes of that loss. And now, she was out there, hidden, trapped by the man who had destroyed everything. Rage surged through him. He lunged toward the laptop, grabbing it before Hayes's men could react. "Then I'll find her," he hissed. "And I'll make sure the world knows who you are." Clutching the evidence, he bolted from the room, sprinting down corridors with Hayes's men in pursuit. Outside, Sarah waited in the truck, eyes wide as David leapt in. "Dad, what happened?" He slammed the door, starting the engine. "Your mom, Sarah, she's alive." Tears welled in her eyes, disbelief clashing with hope. As the truck roared into the storm, David's mind burned with clarity. Clearing his name was no longer the endgame. This fight was bigger, about truth, about dismantling Hayes's empire, about reuniting his family. For the first time, he wasn't just reacting to life's blows. He was choosing his battle. Behind them, black cars surged onto the highway, headlights slicing through the downpour. Hayes wouldn't let go easily, but David no longer felt powerless. He was armed with proof, fueled by love, and guided by a new mission: to bring back the woman he thought he had lost forever. The resolution of one nightmare had opened the door to another. But this time, David was ready. The storm raged as David's battered truck disappeared into the night, chased by the ruthless engines of power. In his pocket lay the evidence that could shatter an empire, but in his heart burned something even stronger: the revelation that his wife, Sarah's mother, was still alive. For years, he had carried the weight of grief, believing he had failed her. Now that sorrow had transformed into a fierce resolve. He wasn't just a janitor anymore, or a scapegoat fighting to clear his name. He was a father on a mission, a man willing to risk everything to reunite his family and expose the truth, no matter the cost. And as Sarah squeezed his hand, whispering, "We'll find her, Dad," the headlights ahead seemed less like threats and more like destiny. Do you believe even the forgotten can rise against the powerful? If you do, comment why.